You're certainly welcome. When Senator Markey was referring to tree-hugging and granola-crunching individuals, I know that didn't apply to anyone in this, any specific member of this committee, but with that, let me recognize Senator Whitehouse.
Mr. Chairman, I resent that remark.
I represent, yes, sir.
I represent that remark. Welcome all. Thank you for your work. I would like to focus a little bit with you all on the question of advanced reactor licensing. As you know, I've been persistent about trying to open the possibility of next-generation advanced nuclear technologies with the ultimate holy grail, if possible, of finding nuclear technologies that can allow us to go through our nuclear waste stockpile and try to turn that into valuable energy rather than leave it lying out there as a massive public health and financial liability. The bill that I have authored and co-sponsored is still in process. We have, I think, considerable support for it. It's very bipartisan. But in the meantime, you all received an additional $5 million appropriation for advanced reactor licensing. And I wanted to get your sense on how far that $5 million takes you. Does that take you 1% of the way to where you need to be, 2%, 10%, or can you like wrap your hands and say, job done, we're all set with that money? What do you think let me put it another way. You're not supposed to ask for more money, so let me say, if you continue to get that additional $5 million year after year, what time frame does that put you on for achieving your goal with respect to advanced reactor licensing? And I know that you're responding to all of our concerns about this by doing things administratively. So if you could fill me in on what's happening administratively and what the $5 million does for you in the context of what you're trying to achieve.
Well, thank you for that question, and I'll start, and my colleagues will probably remember some good points that I'm not going to remember. But I think the most important use we've put that $5 million to is making sure that NRC is engaged and part of the dialogue that is going on between the Department of Energy, the designers of these new designs, the national laboratories, and as having the regulator in the room, I think, is important. So what we've done is what we're bringing to that engagement is we've created a strategy document and then a series of implementation plans. And those are focused towards NRC developing the regulatory capacity. And some of that is, you know, knowing different fuel cycles, knowing different materials types. What kind of capacity and expertise do we need to bring in an informed way to the engagement as the community of designers of these advanced reactors wants to push forward? It's also important that NRC experts be present with the Department of Energy and the national laboratory experts, because what I've learned is that the researchers at DOE National Labs are actually drawing upon the earliest experiences of the atomic history of the United States, because some of the reactor designs are really not entirely new. They are designs that this country did experimental work on or prototyping in the 1960s and 70s.
So at this point, the $5 million is generally being used on outreach and connection with other facilities and
seeing that these the implementation plans allow us to look at what DOE is doing, what the labs are bringing to the table, what the vendors are identifying as the gaps and needs for information that they have. And we're able to, our implementation plans are kind of iterative, so based on the engagement, we're going back. What we don't want to have are total gaps in our expertise and regulatory capacity where we just have to throw up our hands and say, we don't know anything about that type of material, so we're never going to be able to approve its use in a nuclear reactor. So I think that going forward, it gets, we get to taking that framework, though, and applying it to specific technical issues. From a budgetary standpoint, I think that that's where it gets more expensive, because then the labs need to be doing things. We need to be weighing in on their testing plans and their data plans and say, well, this, if you collect this data, will it be sufficient for us to make a regulatory determination? So I think the framework is essential, and we've spent the $5 million on that. But in response to your question of 1%.
Now, so let me ask if the other two commissioners would make, if there's anything if you can make a joint statement that you all agree on in terms of a response to this being a question for the record, or if you'd like to add additional thoughts of your own, I would invite you to respond in writing as a question for the record. In my last moments, I just want to say again that to me it is very disappointing and discouraging to see safe and safely operating nuclear plants that produce carbon-free power have to close down in order to build and run new carbon pollution generating plants simply because of the market failure of having any value to the carbon-free nature of nuclear power. And I know that's being resolved a bit at the state level, and I hope that I can continue to work with colleagues to try to get something done akin to our carbon capture utilization and storage bill to encourage the continued safely operating nuclear fleet not to have to be artificially shut down at a time when we could certainly use both the electricity, the jobs in those locations, and the carbon-free nature of that power. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator White.